The Frontier War, the deadliest war yet. The Frontier War was a brutal and devastating conflict that lasted for nearly 2 decades. The militia, a group of rebels and outcasts, fought against a powerful interstellar manufacturing corporation, IMC, for control of the frontier, a remote and dangerous region of space. At the heart of the conflict was the IMC's desire to occupy the frontier and exploit its resources, while the militia fought to protect their homes and families from the corporation's advances. The war was fought on many fronts, with battles taking place on planets and in space, and it claimed the lives of countless soldiers and civilians, and the story behind them is significantly more devastating than what one could imagine. The factions. The Interstellar Manufacturing Corporation, IMC, was a powerful corporation that sought to exploit the resources of the frontier. They had centuries-old investments in the region, which they used as a pretext to occupy it. The IMC had a vast array of resources at its disposal, including advanced technology and a well-trained military force. They were also known to hire mercenary units, like the Apex Predators, to fight on their behalf. The IMC's Archaeological Research, ARES, division was one of the most controversial factions in the war. The division was based on the planet Typhon and conducted a wide range of scientific experiments, including those on human subjects, for military use. The division was known for their unethical methods and inhumane practices, which further fueled the militia's resistance against the IMC. On the other side of the conflict was the militia, a group of rebels and outcasts who banded together to protect their homes and families from the IMC's advances. The militia was a loosely organized force, made up of different factions from different planets, with no clear leader. They had limited resources compared to the IMC, but they made up for it with their determination and resourcefulness. They were known to use guerrilla tactics and hit-and-run strategies to outsmart the IMC's military force. The Apex Predators were a mercenary unit hired by the IMC to fight in the war. Led by the ruthless Cuban Blisk, the Apex Predators were known for their deadly skills and tactics. They were a small but elite unit, made up of some of the most skilled pilots in the frontier. They were feared by both the militia and the IMC, and they played a significant role in many of the war's major battles. The Apex Predators were known for their brutal and ruthless tactics, leaving no survivors in their wake. The Frontier War was a complex and brutal conflict, with a wide range of factions and leaders, each with their own goals and tactics. The IMC, with its vast resources, sought to exploit the region, while the militia fought to protect their homes and families. The Apex Predators and the IMC's ARES division were key players in the war, known for their controversial methods and deadly tactics. The colonization of the frontier, the Titan War. The prelude to the Frontier War can be traced back to the early days of colonization on the frontier, when the IMC veterans were given money and land in the new territory as part of the company's GI Bill. However, as the IMC became embroiled in a series of wars back in the core systems, they pulled their support from the frontier settlers, leaving them to fend for themselves. Decades passed, and the frontier began to thrive as a separate civilization, with its own government and economy. However, the IMC eventually returned to the frontier, claiming that they had the right to control the territory and its resources. The frontier's population, who had built their lives independently, resisted this attempt to regain control. The Titan Wars were a series of conflicts that took place around 15 years before the Battle of Demeter, between the IMC and the frontier settlers. The details of these wars are not well documented, but it is believed that the IMC emerged victorious. The Titan Wars were devastating and marked the beginning of the end for the frontier settlers, as the IMC continued to exert control over the colony. One of the key figures in the prelude to the Frontier Wars was James McCallan, who served as the executive officer on the IMC flagship IMS Odyssey. After witnessing the IMC's brutal treatment of the frontier citizens during the Titan Wars, McAllen grew disillusioned with the company. Eventually, he would be given control of the Odyssey by his commanding officer, Marcus Graves, in order to take the ship and crash it on the planet Troy. McAllen's actions were officially condemned by the IMC as treason, but he would become a symbol of hope and inspiration for the frontier citizens as they prepared to fight for their freedom in the Frontier War. The Frontier War begins. The stage was set for a devastating Frontier War, with both sides determined to emerge victorious. The IMC, led by the ambitious and ruthless Syncfront Graves, sought to exert their control over the frontier and its resources, while the militia, under the leadership of the determined and resourceful General Sarah Briggs, fought to defend the autonomy and freedom of the frontier citizens. As the war raged on, both sides employed a variety of tactics and strategies to gain the upper hand. The IMC utilized their advanced technology and military might, deploying powerful titans and deadly mercenaries like the apex predators to crush their opponents. The militia, on the other hand, relied on guerrilla tactics and hit-and-run attacks to wear down the IMC forces. The turning point of the war came with the Fracture Operation, in which the militia successfully attacked an IMC refueling facility, stealing vital fuel and retreating into Sector Bravo 217. This retreat led the IMC to discover Colony G21 and the wreckage of the IMS Odyssey, resulting in a brutal massacre conducted by the apex predators. The militia, however, were able to extract McAllen and a handful of survivors, leading to the defector joining their cause. With the help of McAllen's knowledge and experience, the militia were able to launch a series of successful offensives, crippling the IMC's logistics strain and stranding their surviving forces on the frontier indefinitely. The militia also established the Special Forces based on GRIDIRON and conducted a prison break on the IMC's Overlook Way station, but the IMC fought back, continuing to attack militia-allied settlements such as the Nexus and Smuggler's Cove. The aftermath of DEMETER. As the dust settled after the devastating Battle of DEMETER, the IMC regrouped and restructured under the command of Vice Admiral Spyglass, dubbed the Remnant Fleet. The IMC had lost a significant number of personnel, including Marcus Graves, who defected to the militia. The militia, now stronger and more organized than ever, began targeting IMC facilities, producing specters, using information provided by Graves and Barker. But despite their efforts, the IMC's logistics remained intact, with new automations such as the Stalker, Tick, Reaper, and Simulacrum being deployed in the field. As the Remnant Fleet set up a new operations base on an uncharted world, they displaced the local residents and began mass excavations, uncovering ancient alien ruins. But the militia quickly responded to the SOS signals sent out by the colonists, leading to a fierce battle between the two armies. The Remnant Fleet also launched a series of resource raids on Allied and enemy systems, but their motives were unclear, and some units began to view them as rogue elements. Despite their resource-gathering efforts, the IMC slowly began to lose ground to the militia. As the deadline for the construction of a new gateway at DEMETER passed, the fleet was still stranded on the frontier, and it would be at least another 3 years before they could return home. In the meantime, the militia transformed from a loosely organized group of rebels into a professional military force, manufacturing their own war material, such as the Vanguard Titan chassis, a McAllen-class carrier. They also launched Operation BROADSWORD, a widespread push across the frontier to further drive the IMC back. With the tide turning in their favor, the militia seemed unstoppable as they marched towards victory on the battlefield. Operation Broadsword, a turning point. Operation Broadsword was a turning point in the war between the militia and the IMC. The operation began in the year 28 New Era and was led by militia commander Sarah Briggs and James McAllen, who had both risen through the ranks since the Battle of DEMETER. The operation was a massive undertaking, involving thousands of militia soldiers, pilots, and titans, as well as the support of various allied factions and groups. One of the key players in the operation was Jack Cooper, a rifleman who had been promoted to the rank of pilot and had proven himself to be a skilled and capable warrior. Cooper would play a major role in the Battle of Typhon, where he would be instrumental in the destruction of the IMC superweapon and the near elimination of the apex predators. Another important character was Marcus Graves, the former Syncfront, who had defected to the militia after the Battle of Demeter. Graves would provide valuable intelligence to the militia, including locations of numerous IMC facilities, such as the Hammond Robotics Corporate HQ and Zone 18 production plant. The operation would see many battles, but it was not without its losses. Many militia soldiers, pilots, and titans would be lost, including the death of the militia titan, Sarah Briggs. However, the operation would be a success, with the militia taking control of a significant portion of the frontier and significantly weakening the IMC's position. The militia would also be able to manufacture their own war material, such as the Vanguard Titan chassis and the Macallan-class carrier, ditching their need to steal supplies from IMC garrisons. With the Monarch Titans, the militia would be able to challenge the IMC's military superiority and would be able to push the IMC back further and further. Operation Broadsword would be a turning point in the war, with the militia gaining the upper hand for the first time in the conflict. The Battle of Gridiron. The final battle at Gridiron was a brutal and devastating conflict, with both sides pouring everything they had into the fight. The militia, under the leadership of Jack Cooper, had been pushed to the brink by the IMC and their relentless assaults on the frontier. But Cooper, along with his fellow pilots and soldiers, were determined to see the war through to the end. The battle itself was intense and chaotic, with titans clashing in the streets and soldiers fighting hand-to-hand in the rubble. Despite the IMC's superior firepower, the militia's determination and resourcefulness proved to be the decisive factor in the battle. In the end, the IMC's forces were decimated and their leadership was captured or killed. With the IMC's defeat, the war was finally over, but the cost of victory was steep. The frontier was left in ruins, with entire cities and towns reduced to rubble. Millions of lives were lost on both sides, and the survivors were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. For the militia, the victory was bittersweet. They had won the war, but at a great personal cost. Many of their comrades and friends had fallen in battle, and the future of the frontier was uncertain. But despite the sadness and uncertainty, there was also hope. The people of the frontier would have to come together to rebuild and create a new future for themselves. For Jack Cooper, the end of the war marked the end of a chapter in his life. He had been a pilot, a soldier, and leader, but now he was just a man. He would have to find a new purpose, a new identity, in a world that had been forever changed by the war. And so, the war came to an end, but the memories of the dead and the scars of the living would remain forever. The frontier would never be the same again, but the people would carry on, for better or for worse, and that in itself was a victory. The free militia emerged victorious, but at a great cost. The war left the frontier in ruins and the people traumatized. Even now, almost 2 decades later, the effects of the war can still be felt throughout the region.